A man lies in the road, his body broken after being hit head-on by a Jack and Jill ice cream truck. As the light fades from his life, the last thing he sees is an image of his favorite cookies and cream cone. And then there's darkness. Except somewhere in that darkness, there's a door slightly ajar, with a bright light shining through the crack. He walks through the door, and to his surprise, he's surrounded by white fluffy clouds bathed in glorious sunshine. His ears are filled with the most blissful music, a sound so pleasant he could listen to it for eternity. Then suddenly he's faced with and he starts turning the pages of what looks like some kind of unbelievably large directory. "Okay, you're good to go," says Peter, and he opens the doors. What the guy doesn't know is that if he had a black mark against his name in that book, it would have been a ride in the elevator down to hell. When the man's finally ensconced in his personal bit of heaven, the owner of the place does a meet and greet. The man's God. He's larger than life and wears a wonderfully... The end. Okay, so that's not strictly a true story, but you could say it's based on stories that some of you might have heard at one point in your life. The idea of St. Peter holding the keys to heaven and God having a really well-maintained white beard is, of course, still, someone didn't just come up with the idea because it sounded nice and works well in Hollywood movies. The idea of St. Peter guarding the gates to heaven is usually credited only with being part of Christian folklore. As you'll see today, for many different people, God comes and for many Christians, that's the place you'll go if you lived a moral life. As for the clouds, well, when you look at the history of hell, you can connect it with an underworld, aka Hades or hell. And this is from the Bible. The rich man also died and he was buried, and full of flames and generally polluted. Heaven, on the other hand, is the opposite, so it makes sense that it's up in the sky where it's bright and full of white, fluffy clouds. We're not saying all Christians believe this, but the imagery just makes sense. You can find plenty of artists' interpretations of heaven, and it's generally up in the sky. There's also the fact that heaven's supposed to come. Most Christians believe that this will come about as the entire earth is rejuvenated, possibly recreated from scratch. Or it could simply be an allegory that first-century Jews could easily imagine. Some scholars say those early writers of Christianity didn't talk about being zoomed, but also dwell with the humans, according to another part of the Bible. It's complicated, very complicated. Some Christians think that when they die they'll be judged, but others will tell you that at some point there will be a judgment day in the future for all souls, whether part of the living or part of the dead. Jesus famously said this, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies." So that's one concept of God, and that's the God you might have learned about in Sunday school. But in the view of today's show, it's a pretty simplistic version of God. There is the common narrative that God is the supremely powerful being, a being of unimaginable intelligence that's everywhere and sees everything, doesn't mess with human affairs. These people can call themselves deists. Then there are pantheists who will tell you that God and the universe are the same thing. Animists, on the other hand, believe God or spirits are in all the things around us. There's the Hindu religion. In that you find three main gods: Brahma, the creator of the universe, 330 million Hindu gods, although we found Hindu scholars who say that that's a myth. In short, it's all about how a certain word is translated. It can be translated as million or supreme. If it's supreme, then that would mean 33 supreme gods, not 33 million. Still, to talk about those gods, we need a lot of time, so we'll leave them alone today. Say there are three main beliefs. One is that God sees all humans as equal and he wants to give work for it. And another is some folks have done certain things on earth and are pretty much accepted into God's kingdom when the time comes. Often they carry around with them magazines, sometimes featuring pictures of smiling humans walking through green pastures with equally contented animals. In the background, the world burns. You can make the choice, let Jehovah into your life and hang out with the lions in the fields, or don't and live within the fight. Depend on who you talk to about God. God might also be the all-powerful supreme being for believers, but his modus operandi not everyone can agree on. In fact, you could say the disagreements have caused a few arguments along the centuries. But what about that guy with the long white beard and white hair? Why does God look like the recent Noam Chomsky? Well, some people might hold the belief that such a God exists, but it's more likely people will tell you that God's more of an energy field, or perhaps something that we can just not imagine. Because we can't imagine what only as a hand, but as time went on, he was more exposed. Think about it, or askew would just not do him justice. A god with acne scars would also not do the job. We're not being facetious here. God was painted symbolistically perfect. It couldn't have been any other way. As you'll find out, trying to depict God at all, even in all his grandeur, is an insult to some people. Okay, so there's the Christian doctrine of the Holy Trinity, which is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. This doctrine says that there are Trinitarianism, and then there are people who believe in God as one entity